technology could have come to North Korea from Russia, with the two countries increasingly closely aligned.
A performance test for Pyongyang's new suicide drones, overseen by Kim Jong-un and shared with the world's media. Armed with explosives, these drones are programmed to follow a specific trajectory to reach and destroy a target. Apparently capable of flying more than 1,000 kilometers, that puts most of South Korea in range. Seoul's Ministry of Defense reacted to the test.
Let me emphasize once again that if North Korea provokes, we will punish in a firm and overwhelming manner.
North Korea sent drones across the border in 2022, which Seoul was unable to shoot down due to their size, and the South has since invested in better preparedness for a drone attack. On seeing images of those tested on Saturday, experts have noticed a close resemblance to Russian unmanned aerial vehicles, further fueling speculation on the extent of Russia's military cooperation with the pariah state.
We understand that some drones were exchanged as gifts between
start this morning. Of course, if you're watching in the evening, you probably won't have to suffer through the delay. But this is Talking Point here on WSN, the content capital. And even though we're a little bit late, I do want to start off with an observation, because of course there are more stories and we could get into the details, but there are some implications which perhaps we may not necessarily want to acknowledge or have identified. And I want to start off with a quote: "Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire." I'm critical of our education system. The main defense, I believe, offered by the Ministry of Education for the results of our CXC examination results is that we are better than the other islands. First of all, to some extent, one wonders if we are trying to make ourselves feel better at their expense. With that said, one could argue that neither situation is necessarily acceptable. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. But we treat education like a one-size-fits-all system where we just have to fill up their minds with knowledge and then they are prepared for the world. When the reality is, that is incorrect. Education is like a fire. You don't need to fill up their minds with knowledge, therefore making them dependent on someone to tell them what to think. You need to prepare them to be able to think critically, to determine the best course of action, the best opinion, the best way, the truth for themselves. Hence the need to light the fire, the spark within them, the burning desire to improve, to learn, to grow. Because to some extent, you can't do it for them. We have to do it for ourselves. So one could argue that education is a fire that, while not necessarily outed or in trouble or in danger of being outed, it's maybe not as grand as we would like it to be. Because at the end of the day, the head of the teachers union pointed it out. We have a 54% passing rates of 5 subjects or more. But to get a certificate, you do need math and English. And when you factor that in, 5 subjects with math and English, it's 45%. What's with the discrepancy? Why are we bothering for the results without math and English? Why are we trying to pad the stats and make things seem better than they really are? Now, to be fair, the passing grade for other subjects were not necessarily that bad. But the 5 CXC certificate mark, however, is almost as bad or just as bad as the math the passing grade for math alarm that was sounded last week. And while we fail to ignite the fire amongst our young people for them to seek truth throughout the world, to seek the capacity within themselves to learn how to judge and determine the truth, the fires of crime are literally continuing to be lit. There's a report that target of a killing, his grave was dug up and his body was set on fire. Given the fact that he had a propensity in the past to escape attempts on his life, the prevailing theory is that they wanted to be sure that it was really him that was killed. The fact that his body was lit on fire afterwards has thrown the police for a loop, and I don't necessarily blame them in this case. We are seeing the callousness of criminals go a step further. It's not just now about gunning children down as collateral damage, and in one of the failed attempts on his life, one child was killed. His grave was literally desecrated. Desecration is defined, a quick search online, as treating a sacred place or thing with violent disrespect. I would argue someone's final resting place should be considered sacred. To what end, we don't know. Now, on a practical level, it wouldn't have necessarily been safe to just leave the body to the elements. Cremation is a form of burial. There could be a twisted sense of doing the right thing by the criminals, but regardless, his grave was dug up. To what extent is this imported, or to what extent is this? Because apparently, allegedly, there were unknown Venezuelan men at the scene. However, I don't know if to take stock in that or not. It could be a local thing, a local development as crime evolves, and the callousness, the fires of callousness and criminal desire continue to grow. Meanwhile, just a report, the Cabo Star apparently should be coming back online, I think by next week, or within a week, next weekend. Extra sailings apparently are going to be scheduled, which would be tough on the crew and the boats. There would be a practical limit to how much extra sailings, so please don't get your hopes totally up. There were reports that it might have had to have gone to Panama to get inspected, but no, apparently the inspector came here, at least according to one report. Regardless, it's somewhat good news that that is being resolved relatively quickly. But there's a downside to the news, because this is the second time in 2 years. And there's hope that a purpose-built vessel would improve the situation, but given our budgetary situation, I have no idea how we would finance that. Meanwhile, back to the original point. What is the fire that is growing within the population? I don't know, but I'm not sure if it's anything good. Frustrations are very easily born when our lack of infrastructure continues to compound all of our errors. But with that said, has anyone identified the need for change? Well, there's a lot to get through, might not get to that story, but let's kick off today's Daily Review. Big story coming out of this weekend, the Port of Spain Infrastructure Development Company, they basically made a play to seize Movitown. Now, that in and of itself is under dispute, in part because there was a rent dispute, or a dispute with regards to the amount of rent owed by Trinbago Commercial Development Companies Limited, Movitown's owner, holding company. There's a dispute between the owners of Movitown and Porcinco, the infrastructure development company, with regards to how much the rent is owed. What compounded the situation was the fact that the tenants themselves were stuck in a rock and a hard place, and the court, they were told that they had to complete and sign an attached form based on letters given to them by that infrastructure development company, and submit it within 48 hours of receiving this letter, which was all done over the weekend. Meanwhile, the poor tenants don't know what's going on. They're essentially being told, comply with this hostile takeover. You have 48 hours to do so. Now, I'm not entirely sure to what extent that played into the judge's decision, but a High Court judge basically issued a late evening injunction preventing the Port of Spain Infrastructure Development Company from communicating with tenants of the Movie Town complex. And apparently a virtual hearing is going to be held this morning. It might be within 32 minutes in order to go over the situation. Because, and what's interesting is, if you, depending on which paper you read, so I would encourage everybody to try to read the stories within all three papers. So I believe that may include yesterday and today, at the very least, because the framing, the perspective, and one then needs to ask the bias behind the story, they're different depending on which newspaper you read. Or at least between one paper and two papers, to some extent, there's a major, clear difference in how the narrative is crafted. Now, according to some reports, and including words from Mr. Derek Chen himself, Movie Town's holding company is arguing that this state company is saying, you owe us more rent. And Movie Town's argument is that, look, we're renting the land, not the buildings. We're not even renting infrastructure because we put the infrastructure down. Infrastructure was not provided for us, just the bare land. So on one hand, there's an argument that is said that, look, the price of rent might actually be what one tenant who owns 3 slots, I don't know how large they are, but has 3 rental businesses, or businesses renting within Movie Town, his rent for the month potentially covers the entire Movie Town rent for the month. But the flip side is, his rent for the month has to deal with the maintenance and upkeep of the infrastructure and facilities of Movie Town, whereas based on what's been presented in the media, at least so far, Movie Town has to pay for all the infrastructure and whatever on the land that they're on, or at the very least the maintenance of the buildings. And it's arguing, why do we have to pay rent of a valuation that may or may not be binding, that the state company did, that may or may not be including valuations of the facilities, the property, the buildings, the structure. That's technically not what you own. So then it also comes to the question, to what extent can the state company send bailiffs to lock Movie Town out of its building because Movie Town is not renting the building? And then on top of that, you have COVID recovery and the fairness or not of when to bring rent back to pre-COVID levels. All of these things apparently were under dispute between Movie Town's representatives and the representatives of the state company. And they apparently agreed on August 22nd, end of last week, to let the courts handle the matter because of the price of arbitration was seen to have been too high. They had a dispute in the amount being owed, and I would imagine there's a dispute even to the legal basis to compel them to pay the rent at this time. So let courts handle it, which I have said that about many cases where there are questions about government overreach or government excess or individual corruption, whether on the private side of the equation or the public side of the equation. So I would say the same thing here. Now, it's difficult to know for sure what is the truth. The problem is, of course, that to some extent it's very difficult to take any state entity at their word at this point, based on two things. One, a general degree of ineptitude and poor results across many examples. So to then assume that this state company just automatically has its acts all together is not a bridge I'm willing to cross at this point in time. Then there's the fact that at least on certain levels with certain state entities, not with this one, at least not yet, there are questionable things or things that lead to questions that go down the avenue of corruption, mismanagement. There's no direct evidence, as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong, of this entity doing such within the public sphere. But unfortunately, they're somewhat paying the price for Paul when their name is technically Peter. But it's hard to give them the benefit of the doubt. Meanwhile, some people will not want to give Movie Town and Mr. Chin and the ownership the benefit of the doubt because big business is rich, right? Now the question is, to what extent is it within the government's interest to play hardball on the matter, and what were to happen if, and I believe Mr. Chin is a Guyanese national, so to some extent that's a minor consideration, relations with Guyana. But what would happen if the government were to seize Movie Town? To some extent, do we even want to trust them running Movie Town, Port of Spain, which would probably have to operate under a different name? And then now, given the propensity of government mismanagement, is this going to be another white elephant that will also further risk the jobs and livelihoods of all involved? And potentially, if the whole thing implodes, it can do significant harm to the economy. Now granted, of course, big businessmen kind of, like in other areas or in other examples, use these facts to kind of shield themselves from certain things. You know, it's a hell of a stick to hit a government with. But the flip side is, depending, and it's not necessarily hard to believe Mr. Chin that, look, we had a dispute. He's not denying that. He intended to pay $1 million. The state entity wants $10 million. He's saying that's too high. We agreed to take it to court, and then all of a sudden, Friday afternoon, this whole thing blows up in our face 1 day later. And then, of course, what compounds my reluctance to give the state company the benefit of the doubt is the fact that a High Court judge decided to grant an injunction, preventing one aspect which I thought was highly questionable. Why are you giving the tenants 48 hours? It's almost like if you're racing to get them on board with you so that the process would be further along and therefore much more difficult to reverse. I'm not sure. I do know that depending on how the situation is managed, it will be very telling with regards to the governance of the country, but it'll be just one more example. Maybe it could end up having a good result. It could be a good example. It could be an example of the process being done and getting a good result and the system working, or maybe not. At this point, we have to wait and see. Moving on to the next story. Ultimately speaking, this is something that's come up before. There is a public consultation on statues, monuments, and signage. And that's going to happen on Wednesday at the Auditorium Conference Center at Government Campus Plaza, Port of Spain, 5 to 7 p.m. It'll be streamed live on TTT. Particularly statues of Christopher Columbus. These things will be considered whether to remove them or to retain them as others and other similar symbols, whether signage, paintings, what have you. An exercise which was scheduled to be done, which makes the Prime Minister's remarks on the coat of arms somewhat upsetting to the people involved, because They want to know why did he make that affirmative determination before this exercise, which the government apparently commissioned, was complete. That's point number one. But more importantly, I'd like to point out the fact that while this debate is not new, and at this point, I could appreciate the Port of Spain mayor's perspective that some aspects of our history must be preserved with regards to certain monuments. And others might say, well, why do we have to erase Columbus at all? At this point, while I don't necessarily trust the motives behind the moves, it's not that big of a deal to me. Steel pan on the coat of arms, fine. Let's do it. It will represent modern TNT better. I get it. Removing Columbus because of what I would call modern politics, political ideology, fine. It's not like, practically speaking, it matters that much to me. I didn't have a field trip to his statue in primary school to learn about Christopher Columbus. Learning about him in a classroom setting about the history of the country in one half an hour, whatever, that's more than enough, I would argue. It's just that now the whole thing has become wider, and I do wonder to what extent it's distracting us from the practical issues, because the existence of a Columbus statue or his 3 ships on the coat of arms or whatever is not going to change crime levels. It's not going to change the economy. It's not going to change the availability of jobs. It's not going to improve our CXC math score and CXC certification rate. It's not going to improve our economy. It's not going to improve our public debt position. It's not going to include our foreign balance of trade position. So I'm not saying we can't make the changes. I just don't want to see it being a drawn-out debate. But I do wonder to what extent people who's mainly going about these topics emotionally, it's important to them, fine, but it will take away from their participation in more important issues. Look at the hand. Don't look at the man hiding behind the curtain, pulling all the levers, and eventually we will see what the new budget will be for the current year and what the deficit will be. The stated deficit, not the actual deficit. Finally, I want to wind up today. There are some other stories I want to get into, including one with Mr. Warner, but I'll save that for tomorrow. There's a new political party, potentially, that's been announced, UPTT. The logo says Unity is Power underneath the lettering. Not entirely sure what the actual name of this potential party will be. There's also a t-shirt. It was a Facebook post on a political Facebook page or social media account. One newspaper reported it as United and Proud. Well, according to today, it's not United and Proud, it's UNC and Proud. Potentially it might be linked to dissidents, not necessarily the politicians who formed the United Patriots slate in 18 elections, but others who are members of the party, not necessarily active politicians, who had issues with the direction of the UNC. That's my guess, based on this social media post, based on the nature of the account and the history of the account. It's interesting to see what will come of this. Again, I do wonder is this a power grab, or is this a genuine move? One of the things that they're speaking to is about alienated young professionals and members of other disaffected groups who apparently have come together to form this initiative. I'll say this: anything that could speak to alienated young professionals is important in TNT. It's important because, as cliche as it sounds, they literally are the future of the country. Those arguably would be, at the very least, some of the best and brightest of us. And their generation at some point will have to carry the baton, at least for a little while, But right now it seems as though early 20s to late 30s, they want nothing to do with politics, the running of the country. They don't even want to follow the news. And then we will have potentially a generational gap where if we want to complain about the current crop of politicians now, given the performance of some of the newer politicians, I would argue there is room for it to potentially get worse. Because the best and brightest of us, they don't want to get involved in the bubble and bacchanal. They're too serious for that. Unfortunately, the irony is very devastating on our prospects of the future. If there's an initiative to reverse that trend, I would welcome it. But one Facebook post and post on a social media platform that does not mean that there's anything concrete that we could hang our hat on. And I think at the end of the day, that's ultimately the trick question that all political parties not named the UNC and the PNM have to answer. How do we come across as something that is concrete, long-term, stable, dependable, that you could trust to move forward with, and not just be a flash in the pan that will disappear the first sign of poor results? Even the COP did not have the staying power needed to grow into a legitimate political party in the long term. I know they're still in existence, they're a third party. I would argue to grow into something more than a third party. They were there, they were on the cusp, until they weren't. And maybe proportional representation would open that door, but it would open that door to the other harsh realities of a multi-party electoral system. I don't know if we're ready for that or not, but until then, we must wait and see how things unfold. Let's take a break. When we come back, we should be welcoming our guest, the ASP. Stay tuned. This is Talking Point on WSN. We'll be right back after this. Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website, www.fanzonett.com, for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website, fanzonett.com, to make your purchase today.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond
wanna-
to me.
respond
Respond to
to
me
you?
how you would respond to me.
I would, the first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services, yeah.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
Funny enough, I found another scam abroad. But anyway. Oh! Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for my mistake. We have with us our media ambassador from the TTPS, ASP Ashraf Ali, here to talk surprisingly, and I say surprisingly because this is just one of those things where, and maybe I'm being too idealistic, to talk about fraudulent scams and trying to further bring awareness to the citizens of TNT to help push back against them. ASP Ali, good morning, sir.
Morning, Sean. And it's really difficult on a regular basis to come here and we keep on talking about marketplace.
To be fair, it's not as though it's never reasonable to assume we will eliminate all crime of X down to zero, right? It's just statistically, it is so difficult. Granted, you know, we're only 1 point something million,
Yeah.
so it's not completely impossible. But to say that you can maintain zero marketplace scams,
You're doing,
right?
but it just shows that how persons are being very creative, utilizing social media platforms to still find opportunities to commit offenses, and in some contexts, how unaware and gullible some of our citizens are when they're utilizing these platforms. So, you know, we only recently in the Central Division, 3 persons was arrested for marketplace scams as it relates to
online
as it relates to work to own vehicles. Now, I want to make it abundantly clear that work to own vehicles is illegal,
Right.
because when you give a person a vehicle to work,
yeah,
and tell the person to pay for it, and the person goes on the road with PH, you are aiding and abetting in an
Yes.
offense. But then again, there are other persons who may purchase a vehicle and they don't have all the cash at the point in time,
right,
and they work towards owning the vehicle. They may not work the vehicle on the road illegally, but they may be employed in other areas but pay.
Is that also illegal?
No, it is not, because
okay, so the concern is you're taking a situation which is already kind of informal, I
Yes.
think in some cases, then you're adding PH driving on a vehicle you don't legally own, so liability now, I guess, comes into an issue.
They're shifting liability.
If anything happens, like an incident.
And that is the case. And for Trinidad, when people use Trinidad and Tobago, when you use the word work to own, we only speak about directly it came under the umbrella of PH, where persons who have multiple vehicles offer this vehicle for sale to an individual, and they work the vehicle for over a period of time, and after a certain period of time, the vehicle is signed over to them. No.
The seller might be liable for certain incidents because of their ownership?
Because of the ownership also. Because
right, so depending. That's one of the reasons why if you're thinking about it, maybe reconsider.
You have to be very cautious about it. You have to be because at the end of the day, with our fixed penalty notices that we have now, if the driver of that vehicle that is operating your vehicle issues a ticket and does not pay the ticket, you, the owner of the vehicle, is culpable.
Right. Anything happens, you're the name on record, the owner.
The insurance, and any issues with the insurance, you, the owner of the vehicle, is culpable.
Insurance premiums could go up.
All those things are sidelined. However, the more concerning one
is
the fact that persons who engage in this activity or take the opportunity, which appears to be something very nice, they may have to go to these persons asking for down payments. These persons make the down payments and never see a vehicle.
Right.
And then they come to the police and say, well, we went on to Marketplace, we saw this ad, we saw this individual, we made a particular down payment, and up to now we have no vehicle, nothing at all.
First of all, I do want to ask, and I don't know if this is a police question, but generally speaking, business sense-wise, if I'm going to pay a deposit on something, shouldn't I see it first? This is not like booking a hotel destination in a foreign country. We're in the same country, and I'm paying a deposit on a vehicle I haven't necessarily seen. That's because, and I guess this is where the police comes in, that's like scam alert 101. You make yourself an easy target to just get frauded, scammed.
Exactly, and sometimes they ask for persons to come with the down payment. You are robbed. And these are, we continue to say that you need to be very careful with these. Now, if you see a vehicle on display on the marketplace,
yeah,
or even if you're buying a vehicle on a whole, a second-hand vehicle, you need to do some due diligence.
Because I'll tell you why. This is coincidental. I didn't necessarily do this as research. Over the weekend, I saw a story about fraud with real estate in America, where the fraudsters would break the lockbox, which would hold the key to the building. I don't know why you would have a lockbox with a key to the building on the side that could be broken into, but they would do that, right? Have their own advertisements to rent the place. They have the key, so they could show people, take the deposit and run.
Yes.
Because people think, well, they have the key to the house, they must be legit when they give the deposit. And, you know, not anything fancy homes, right? But the point is, it's relatively easy money, right? So just because there's something that you can see,
it doesn't always mean that it is right.
It could be a stolen car.
It is. They have situations where you purchase the vehicle and you realize that the vehicle is stolen.
And if the vehicle is stolen, you don't get to keep the vehicle. Huh?
No, you could be held accountable because you're in possession. You're in possession of a stolen vehicle, and you have to identify. You have to know how to answer the questions as how are you in possession of a stolen vehicle.
So the next thing is now one of the things that makes scamulant activities like this difficult, but also situations like that more difficult to deal with. I assume a lot of these things don't have any sort of paperwork whatsoever.
No transactional linkages that you can say, well, okay, it's sometimes cash transactions, and that's it. You don't even know the individual or see the individual for the first time, and you meet this individual handing over some cash, and that's it.
Is it that we kind of took things for granted in our society before we were fine with doing these cash transactions, not necessarily having records? But then ironically, to some extent, like the nature of society and the circumstance, the environment changed. Because I do feel to some extent, I don't know if people back in the day would have been this gullible.
I wouldn't say no. It may have happened. But the extent of what is happening now, where a lot of persons are trying to get into earning an income, earning a living, they're trying all different avenues. Mm-hmm. And by utilizing all these different avenues, they are putting themselves out and making themselves more vulnerable to criminal activities.
Because sellers could, to highlight, sellers could also be victims.
Exactly.
Not just buyers.
So when we choose to go down these roads or exploring these opportunities that on these social media platforms and any one of these platforms, you have to be conscious of the information that we continue to share with you. And we're not sharing it because we feel we just come out here to share it. It is because we have evidence to support that persons also have been victim of it. And you need to address the situation and do as much as you can. Do some vehicle checks. You can get a vehicle, you can get the number plate and go to licensing, get a certified copy for the vehicle, right? Apply for a certified copy.
Now, I know you can do that. I just don't know how easy or practical that would be sometimes.
It's not an issue. You can apply for a certified copy for any vehicle if you're going to purchase it. You want to verify who's the actual owner of the vehicle. Yeah. And if it is that you realize that you're the owner of the vehicle, the person is the owner of the vehicle. Sometimes and you see somebody else is the owner, who purported to be the owner of the vehicle, and then something has to be wrong.
Is it the phenomenon? Because I would imagine back in the day, if someone saw a classified ad to sell a vehicle, I don't know if there was a lot of fraud going on in those days, and I actually would like to assume that people would have been a bit more careful back then. We didn't necessarily, it's difficult to say why that would be why there wasn't as much fraud then, or if just people weren't as, evil, for lack of a better way to put it, as they are now. But is it because of the internet? It's like, well, it's on the internet, so it must be true, right?
Yeah, so people take a lot of risk here. We take a lot of risk here, not understanding the consequences of the risk. It's only after the fact that we realize what is taking place. And even with this person's going on the marketplace, purchasing vehicles to, want of a better word, work to own, which is not the proper thing.
Yeah.
We have persons who actually work in PH now with their own vehicles, their own private vehicles, and they're putting themselves at risk out there because they are now being robbed. They can lose their vehicle. Only recently, a taxi driver was coming from the east, picked up an individual in the Baratara area, a female. The female asked to pick up another female. He did in fact pick up another female and was heading back to the east. When he picked up the other female, he was robbed. 2 female robbed the taxi driver, took his vehicle and drove off. They were caught in the vehicle. And when they were caught in the vehicle in the east, there was another male occupant of the vehicle. So 3 persons in the said vehicle was arrested by the police officers. But what is very interesting is that, and we keep saying it, is they're under the age of 20. 2 female under the age of 20. And a male occupant also under the age of 20. So 3 of them are under the age of 20 who is in fact involved in this. We feel it comfortable to commit an offense of this nature.
Was there a sense that this was a crime of opportunity, or this was part of a wider, longer term? You know?
Based on what it is was planned.
Right.
Because if you are jumping into the vehicle and asking the driver to pick up another individual, you know what your plan is. So this is not this didn't happen as an opportunity. This is not planned thing. This is something that you all are accustomed doing. And these are some of the things that we say, that even though you want to go down the avenue of utilizing your private vehicle to make an extra earnings, the risk associated with it, first from the aspect of it is that it is illegal to be doing a work to own process.
Yeah.
Because you're leaving yourself out at risk.
If it's a H card, there's also a lot of loopholes.
There's a lot of things. So
yeah.
But we want to maximize our vehicle. So what you're doing is that you want to say, okay, I am going to give this person to work this vehicle and to work this vehicle to own and sign off, and even sometimes people actually do some contracts, give them receipts and all kind of things as to the amount of money person's paying for it, and then, so they are legit. There are persons who actually treat it with a level of legitimacy in the context that it might be similar to like what a hire purchase might be like, right? When a person pays and they are how I should say, they abide by all the legal requirements in the context of having a professional and legal professional, being professional and being above board by giving you a receipt and saying, okay, so and so the case and explain. No, that is one aspect of it. So I'm not saying that everyone who involved in it is committing an illegal act.
Yeah, because
right?
The stories are plentiful of people who, because of the economy, they lost their job, they have to sell their car. Like, this is not new.
No, it is
selling personal assets, especially a car.
It is not new, but you have to be careful now as to when you go on these marketplace And a marketplace seems to be popping up on a regular basis.
I need to ask, I know that the advice was to do the transactions in view of the police, inform the police, maybe get an officer to come out
yes.
But I do wonder, this is just a question, maybe you could put this to the superiors, could maybe more formal arrangements and processes be put in place to kind of make it more of a formal thing where, yes, and then an officer will come out and treat with certain things?
We have to be careful as a law enforcement agency getting involved in a private or civil matter.
Right.
We provide a level of advice, but we cannot overstep our advice and get into the civil realm. A contractual arrangement between two individuals who's a private arrangement, that is yours. If anything goes awry with it and it goes wrong, you have to take your civil action.
Mm-hmm. On that level?
On that level. Trying to involve the police and say the police was present when we made this transaction, it means that you are now bringing the police officers into a civil court.
Right.
Right? So we have to be careful with that. So, but what we try to do is that indirectly, if you know you're coming to a police station, just come to a police station. Even if you go, the police officers, the police service, if you're going to buy an engine, when you go to buy an engine at the foreign dealers, right, and you purchase an engine, they give you a receipt, and before they give you documentation, they tell you have to come to the police station to run a check on it to see if this engine was ever stolen, and they sign off on it. So we check to see if the engine was stolen, and once it's stolen.
So the fraud part you could cover, but then the business transaction part of it,
it's private.
So, and that's where it gets tricky.
Yes, so that is why we ask persons to come into the station. If you're going to buy a vehicle, if you're going to purchase a vehicle, nothing wrong. Come to the police station and we're going to buy this vehicle. The police will check the vehicle because we have ways to check to see whether or not the vehicle was tampered with or anything like that, or if it was ever recorded as reported stolen or anything like that. The police will assist you in trying to get this transaction as legal as it is. It all depends on if you want to engage.
But if
the police,
say if I'm selling an iPhone, they don't have the same level of.
No, it's the iPhone is a bit.
Yeah, it would be different because because that is right. At most you would have, well, I purchased a phone.
Yeah.
Right. It might not even necessarily on the receipt say have a serial number of the phone.
So we have a lot of challenges, and when we deal with this type of thing, because people often for sale a lot of items. A lot of phones have been stolen in snatches, nothing, and been sold to many of these shops who do, persons who are doing phone repairs, right? Then sometimes you have somebody say, well, I have a phone to sell.
Yeah.
And they just a long conversation, I know this one, you know this one, and so and
it's also very common because people, I don't know how, but they change their phones almost like they change their clothes.
A lot of persons do that. So you really do not know at some point in time whether or not the phone was stolen or otherwise. Right? You may be put in a position where you have a stolen phone. Right, so sometimes when you're buying, and that is why when you're buying second-hand or third-hand, the risk associated with the phones, together with vehicles that could be stolen, you could be subjected to these scams at the same time. Even phones, the phones are scams also.
Now I did say that, look, trying to reduce any crime to zero, right? Although I think kidnapping was as close to zero as it could be, right, for the most part, but on a general scale, to reduce any crime to zero is somewhat difficult. But with that said, does the environment, is it good enough as is, or do we need to improve some things with regards to laws or regulations?
The laws are there, so we don't need the laws or regulation to enforce. What we need is for platforms of this nature to generally keep sending out the messages for persons to understand when you have going along these type of transaction, utilizing these platforms, there is a risk that you are going to take. The risk of being scammed, the risk of meeting an individual that you have never met before, where the possibility of being robbed can be there, and sometimes you don't know who's genuine on any platform, because That's how the platforms
Because what
are.
happened to that taxi driver could happen to a phone seller,
anybody,
seller, to a buyer.
And we have reports and evidence to support that these things have been happening on a regular basis. And sometimes people report it, sometimes people don't report it.
Just final question, we have calls waiting. Has the Ministry of Education maybe done anything with regards to schools? Because I would imagine school children could also potentially, on a smaller scale,
I can't speak on
victims, not just involved.
I can't speak on the ministry perspective, but the TTPS, through our community engagements and through our school engagements, we do talk to children along these lines about the risk associated with the social media platforms.
Okay, let's take a break. I think we had a caller waiting. Sorry about that, but you could call in as soon as, and we'll take you right away. But we will just take a short break. When we come back, we will formally open up the phone line. Stay tuned.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus. Quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
I'm Rocky and talking about the WSND Content Capital. You could call in and have your say. The phone lines are open. Now, I will just say this on the record. I won't go into the details. There was an interaction that I was a part of. If anyone who is watching the show wants to call in and to talk about it, I am more than happy to. I don't necessarily want to bring it up because I don't want to vent my frustrations and potentially drag other people into a situation that really and truly it's not necessary. Multiple other parties not directly concerned. But with that said, we have Digger Martin line. Good morning, caller, you on the air.
Good morning, Sean, and good morning to the Honorable Soup.
Good morning, sir.
Right, and I'm going directly to you, Superintendent, and I'm asking you, because there are a lot of things happening in Trinidad that the TTPS is front and center. Mm-hmm. And one in particular is the investigation into the Obi and Tobago. Where is that? And more importantly, I'm going to link that with what I saw in Sandy Grande, where a grave was dug up and it was burnt. So all of those, I don't know if there's any connection.
What in Tobago, caller? Sorry?
The
Obia. Okay, right, yes.
Right. And the Sandy Grande, the digging up of the grave.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not too sure where all of that fits in. But the police say when you see something, say something. And I'm seeing something that is happening in Trinidad that I believe has some connection with something 10 years ago, where the head of a prominent minister's nephew was decapitated. And I want to know if the police has been able to find any link with that, because that was attributed to Colombian drug lords, and we have the Venezuelan drug lords trying and attempting, that is what all the criminologists say, to take over the narco trafficking trade in Trinidad. So I'm looking for linkage, and I'm going to link that to what has happened in the Dominican Republic Caribbean waters. As of yesterday, the HMS Trent, which is a Navy vessel of the British, patrolling their colonies, intercepted a very, very large shipment of coke. So I want to know how the police is looking at that from the broadest perspective. We can't just say, okay, that is a cops and they're blowing it and everything. I want to know why and how the intelligence is being gathered at the police. And I'm going to suggest two things that we could bring home aside into a screeching out. And I'm going to name it the Pande Protocol and the Ramesh Protocol. It might be draconian from my vantage, but I think that will give us some good sleepy nights. The Pande Protocol was the ship rider agreement. And what has happened with the HMS Trent and the British Navy is something similar to that. They're protecting the borders of their colonies. Pande had an arrangement, and I think probably Barbados, where the ship rider gave them the ability to help us control the border. What that will do, that will immediately mitigate and help us with our border patrol and narco trafficking and ammunition trafficking. And the Ramesh Protocol is execution by hanging immediately. Those two things, I believe, could bring some peace to Trinidad and Tobago. I'll go and have a nice morning.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
But I hear the caller about that is outside the scope of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
Right.
One, those two protocols are within the umbrella of national security and the Prime Minister, and right. So that is outside of my the Office of the Commissioner's responsibility. The other one is within the judiciary, and police service cannot get involved in that what decision making within the judiciary.
Now, the HMS Trent apparently was operating as part of the Joint Interagency Task Force South, which I believe is spearheaded by the U.S., and their efforts to interdict cocaine in the region was also, there was also a U.S. Coast Guard interdiction in the Caribbean Sea last week of 40 million, and then there was the big one reported, I think it was near Florida, 96 US millions of cocaine, I think it was last month.
But you can see that based on all of that, the criminal elements is international.
Yeah.
Right? Cross borders, cross international waters, there are a lot of things that's happening across the world when it comes to criminal elements. So yes, I understand the caller's perspective that we do have the influence of other countries through migrants.
Long story short, I think the decapitations and the violence and the burning of the body, that might be the drug lords and the influence of the drug cartels. The Obeah story, I think, is potentially separate, but we have San Fernando on the line first and then San Juan after. San Fernando, good morning, caller, you're on here.
Good morning, Sean. Good
morning.
Yes,
good morning, sir.
You know, the police service keeps repeating one thing, that what they are conducting is what they call intelligence-led policing. And it bothers me with the fact that you see more and more people of business people. You're hearing reports of these gangs extorting or trying to extort money from businesses all over the country. The latest is this issue in Moruga, where where information that is coming out, as they say on the streets, is saying that it has to do with some extortion issue and that type of thing. And I looked at an interview with Mr. Mark Bassant on this particular individual who is known to the police. And I want to know When the police have information, it's not evidence, but it is information. So it is intelligence. Why are we not seeing more disruption in this issue of extortion? Because it seems to be widespread all over Trinidad and Tobago, especially Trinidad.
May interject one time.
Sure.
As you're on the, you know for a fact that in order for us to treat with it, there are reports, but let us be fair. These reports are not coming to the police. These reports are being made. This one no, that one no, everybody know except the victim who is coming forward. And we know for a fact that the victims themselves are afraid to come forward because that they fear for their life, they fear for their family. So it's something that we are Akura with. Our intelligence does in fact identify certain persons who have been involved or is part and parcel of this. But in order for us to treat with it from a legal perspective, we need evidence to go before the court. Unfortunately, many of the persons who have made these allegations are not coming forward to give us anything at all. Now, we cannot not understand what the persons are going through. So they don't want to come forward and give the information, but at the same time, we have to treat with it from trying to prevent anything further from happening for the individuals. So we are honestly speaking, we are in a rock and a hard place when it comes to extortion, because extortion is not something that anybody was willing to pay, because at the end of the day, persons who facilitate extortion under the law, they are aiding and abetting or facilitating criminal activities. That is the basic way it is too also.
I do, and if that needs to
But what I'm saying, ASPRD, is in what I think the police not doing, and which in the past the police did, is the police practice disruption. And I'm not seeing more police, I can't say more about disruption on air, but you and I know.
I understand what you're saying. It has been happening. The extent to which a lot of persons may want it to happen, it may not have been generally publicized how we treated it. So I understand what you are saying in that context.
No, one other thing.
Quick.
Yeah, quickly. I encountered last week what they call an unmarked police vehicle. It was so disturbing how they behaved in that vehicle. It was like in the evening time. I would say about 7:30. A friend and I got a call. We were together, and his wife had shut down, and we went to the location. When we reached there, and that is in the city of San Fernando. When we reached there, she had called somebody else, and the young man was there to assist. Okay, we got the vehicle started. So the three of us were parked, 3 vehicles parked on the side of the road. The road was wide enough for the vehicle traffic to still traverse. What happened is, when we had finished, it wasn't long, a vehicle stopped. An unmarked SUV stopped. Now, I know the vehicle because I am accurate with a lot of the police, unmarked vehicles around. This is one of the newer ones that they have gotten. What disturbed me, okay, they're highly tinted. What disturbed me, that vehicle stopped alongside my friend's wife's vehicle. There are 3 vehicles, so I am behind that one, and the young man is in the front of it. That vehicle stopped. It stopped, and it stopped traffic because traffic was flowing, so the vehicle, it stopped in the middle of the road. That driver never put on the siren, never put on the lights, because they have lights, even though it's unmarked, and the vehicle stood there for about a minute. That was so disturbing, because this is you've seen a tinted vehicle stop alongside people on the side of the road, and they stopped the traffic, but nobody came out, nobody set down the glass. But I knew, and I said to my friend, I said, that is an unmarked vehicle. And so the young man went away, and we got in our vehicle. And it's only when we got in our vehicle, because we are the side of the road, the person sent the glass down probably about 4 inches and was a female and uttered, "You're taking long to move from here." It was so disturbing because I know it was the police, because I know the vehicle. And I confirmed it. And that is the attitude that needs to change with some of these young police officers. That attitude that they have.
Well,
and that's all I have to say about that ASPI. Thanks.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
It's something that we have been continuously hearing about in the manner in which these people behave. These officers.
Yeah, I have an observation to make, not necessarily to pile on, but we do have someone that has been waiting. Do we still have the caller? Good morning, caller. You on here?
A very good morning to you, Sean.
Morning.
And a very good morning to the Superintendent Ali.
Morning, sir.
Yes. Let me revisit an issue in light of the alarming crime rate. Let me revisit an issue that I raised on more than one occasion in the past. A few months ago, 4 people were killed in a housing complex, HCC complex in Kokorit. And the police told us, after those people were murdered, that they had a suspect. There was a gentleman about to board a flight the very next morning to go to the United States of America. And we were told that the police had detained that individual. They had taken him back to his house, wherever he lives. I don't know exactly his exact address. And when they searched his premises, where the person lived, they found unlicensed firearms and ammunition. We have not heard anything about that. The goodly gentleman there, with all due respect, Superintendent, come back to us and inform the public. And I gave him some time to be fair to him, and I think this would be in excess of 2 months. Superintendent Ali has not told us, because I wait with bated breath every time he comes on the program. My family members say, give the gentleman, to be fair to him, give him a little time. He promised faithfully that he will apprise us of this situation. We haven't heard anything, because the reason why I say that, we are facing what could turn out to be a record number of homicides for this year, 2024. We are heading for 600, in excess of all the criminologists predict that our murder rate will exceed 600 murders by the 31st of December this year, 2024. I think the last record was when Mr. Manning was Prime Minister. They had a record 550 in 2008. But I don't know what it is. I heard on another frequency, they were interviewing a gentleman in the light of the Maruga killings, where a gentleman and his 5-year-old daughter, they were killed, they were assassinated. They were interviewing this gentleman and said he did not put a hit on the gentleman. He was not trying to extort any money from the gentleman. So I don't know. I think I have given Superintendent Ali enough time as regards this individual who was stopped from boarding a flight to go to America. And before I go, let me just touch on this extortion thing. I don't know if the police adopt like what they do in the larger metropolitan countries. I don't know if our local police here, if they know anything about what is normally referred to as a sting operation. I don't know if this is alien and foreign to the local police.
Let me stop you right here one time. Let me stop you one time.
Right? About the sting operation?
No, not even sting operation. And sometimes you have to be. I understand where you're coming from, and there's sometimes that when an investigation is ongoing, divulging information is not.
No, I'm not talking about divulging information. I never spoke anything about divulging information.
So the sting operation, and I just mentioned, if you was listening,
I'll respond.
Sure.
Go ahead.
If you was listening to me just now when I was mentioning about extortions, I am saying that in order for us to treat with the information of extortion, The victims have to come forward and say something. If the victim is not giving us any information as to who and when, the time and location that something is about to happen, we cannot even do a sting operation. However, we have done sting operation when it is involving police officers, where persons allege police officers involved in certain activities, and they're quick to come forward and give us information about involving police officers where we took action. But when it comes to these criminal elements who are extorting money, they are not willing to come forward. And that is a challenge that we continue to face.
But there are reasons why they will not come forward.
And we know, and we are aware of all the reasons.
To be fair, Kuala, he has a point that when you brought up this sting operation as the first thing that came to mind, you need to have an active case. And to have an active case, you need, in this case, you need a report to be made by somebody. You can't just assume, oh, well, there's extortion going on here, so let's conduct a sting operation, not get the cooperation of the alleged victim in order to do it. That's practically impossible.
Because the victim of extortion, hello?
Yes, you're on here.
They are afraid, they fear for their lives, the lives of their wives and children. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't want to put my neck out. But they can't trust the police too, because they don't have the police are beneficiaries of this extortion money.
Well, Kola, you've put forward a lot.
There was an incident where the Sandy Grande police were taking money from some cash register in some businessman place.
Yeah.
That is on record.
Yes, the footage went, I believe it went viral.
And the matter is before the courts now.
And
I mean, the police need to, I mean, the police are not ordinary people like Sean Michael Small. They are gear or two above us. They have certain intelligence and they need to work on it. Look, we had Germany, before I go, Germany, 3 people were stabbed and killed within a matter of hours. The German police were able to arrest somebody, a 15-year-old person, and then they have now held a second man has come forward and surrendered.
Yeah.
As the investigations go into it, something is lacking in the police force. We have heard the commissioner of police.
It's not the police force. It's not the police force alone. Something is lacking in Trinidad and Tobago with all of us in
Kola, I understand your frustration, but all right,
because the police have allowed the crime situation to get out of hand.
Well, I would actually say that it's not.
You cannot close the stable door after the horse has gone. Crime is there where it is because the police sat idly.
All right, Kola, I understand your passion, but you should give us a chance to make full. I would like to respond to several things, including that. Kola, thank you.
We are heading for 600 murders.
Kola, thank you. Can you? We have to end because I would like to respond to that. I understand the temptation is to blame the police for everything, but I've gone on the record before and say that the greatest breakdown of national security is our open borders. So to some extent, the barn door that is open for the horse to bolt is not the police. We need to understand that the system between law enforcement and the courts has a capacity. And on a practical level, we could only increase our capacity by so much, additively. But the problem has grown exponentially. It's grown exponentially because of the gun smuggling coming. The open borders is the primary door that got this ball rolling to where it is. That's why guns are, at one point, the ammunition was more expensive than the gun. The only reason why I say at one point is now they're firing so much rounds to kill a single person. You kind of wonder how expensive the bullets are now.
Exactly. And
right?
then I understand the frustration of the caller, but at the end of the day, we have to take responsibility as Trinidad and Tobago.
I would just also like to remind people, whether we like to admit it or not, the police unfortunately come from us. And they are prone to ordinary faults. I guess the question is, to some extent, to what degree is that a reasonable expectation or acceptable? Because if they make too much, if they are too much within the, oh, well, I just made a mistake like a common civilian, you know, their position, their responsibility does beg.
We understand the situation that law enforcement is, that we are held to a higher standard because we are the keepers of the law in Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, I will say this. I could appreciate that you understand that. I don't know if the entire service understands that. Hopefully the new young men coming through the training do understand that. We have Trinity and a caller after, but Trinity first. Good morning, caller. May have lost Trinity. Trinity, you can call back. The next caller, quick. Good morning, caller, you're on here.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Now, I want to be quick. I have a clipping from a newspaper, Thursday, 9th of November 2023. Now, it says here that there was a meeting between the TTPS and the EMA. All right? And here what it says. Coming out of the meeting, the TTPS recommitted to treating with noise pollution under Section 70 of the Summaries Offensive Act, according to the specific announcements of the Court of Appeal. It added, the court held that as part of the police officer's duty and in the exercise of his discretion in all the circumstances of the case, we are of the view that the decision may rightly be made to take all reasonable steps to immediately abate a public nuisance. Now, can anyone tell me that this meeting, here's my question, what is the police doing differently? Okay? If you can tell me that, because...
Well, and here what's going on. Before you continue with that, because on a number of occasions you talk about nuisance. I want you to find out what is the law concerning the nuisance and how the police officers can execute it.
Excuse me, sir.
So the issue here is that we continue to say, just like the offense of extortion, we need the public to come forward and say that they have to give us the information and actually be willing to be part of the investigation. Nobody is coming, sir, and giving us information about it. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Let me explain something to you. I have been in this fight for over 20 years. Don't feel for a minute that I don't know what I'm speaking about. Let me explain something to you. I am the public, okay? The police has to know by now, the hierarchy of the police service has to know by now that noise pollution is a problem. They also have to know by now that the law it's so intricate and confusing. If you ask 10 police officers about noise pollution, you will get 10 different reasons why it can be. Now listen to me. I can't do anything about it. You know, everyone must know by now that there are neighborhoods where to get people to come together is very difficult or impossible because people have different reasons. Some are scared. The police must know that. The hierarchy of the police service needs to meet with whoever they have to meet with and treat with to get the law adjusted so it will be easier. You can't keep telling us, you see, this is the thing that I have.
You see, you are making assumptions that we have not been interacting with.
Well, I don't know. You are not telling us.
So
how could we know?
We don't have to come. We don't have to come here and tell the public everything that we have interactions with the judiciary.
We don't have sugar on us on the line, caller. We have to end it there. I will just say this: there is no public benefit of the police saying that we attempted to get laws changed. It all depends on the details of the situation. Also, the government does have a legislative agenda. A lot of it is inherited, not necessarily focused on any particular vision. So I would imagine there are a lot of things that some officers at least would like to change that have been on the wish list for years.
We can only make recommendations.
Right? Now, with that said, sugar on something like good morning, caller, you're on here. Oh, something with the connection. Caller, you still there? Caller? Something was up with the connection. We had a very bad buzz. I will say this again. I understand blaming. I understand blaming the police. That is the low-hanging fruit. There is culpability because I get it where you're coming from. The situation could be there probably a lot of officers who don't take noise pollution complaints seriously. Hence my question where I understand you understand certain things and there will be officers like you who understand certain things.
We have been,
I can't say all.
They have, you see, they create, there's legislation that has a broad base.
Yeah.
When it comes to noise pollution.
And it makes things...
Operationalizing it is challenging before the court because we need evidence to support it.
Now, here's the thing. Right, because if the court throws it out, then that's a whole other kettle of fish. With that said, the real issue is the police could only change so much on their own. You need to take this up to the people who are in charge, the legislature, the National Security Council. Because I would argue they are aware. They are so aware about the risks of exposing people to criminal elements who might want to exploit them. Let's not forget that the Attorney General, he did not want to give out the list of attorneys who accepted cases on behalf of the state, who took public money to carry out public briefs. Not, let's, conveniently forgetting the fact that it is public money and the state, the government has to be transparent and accountable for it. But his argument was that they didn't want to put these lawyers, these attorneys at risk. Well, it's interesting that they are very much aware of this, and yet we have not necessarily seen any significant changes to the equation to allow the situation to be changed. Because I will say this, the deficiency of the police notwithstanding, part of the issue is when crime gets out of control, it's very difficult for the system, without any significant changes, to get it back under control. And our capacity to deal with crime, we are way beyond what we could deal with on just the sheer volume of criminal activity, the amount of cases before the court, the amount of work that needs to be done. Yes, it is not helped by the bad apples in the police service, the Coast Guard, the government, the public service, etc., etc. I won't fault you for that observation. It's very real. But literally speaking, I don't think what we have is capable of dealing with 600 murders plus all these other things, and we can't double the police force. It's just not practical.
And when our social fabric is ripping apart, our moral and ethical values in Trinidad and Tobago, as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, is also brought into question, then it also adds to the criminal elements.
Because one of the things is,
and crime. Besides
extortion, there's also, and I haven't hit these stories, but I will tomorrow, the actual stories in detail. There's concerns about illegal quarrying being part of organized crime. And the point of that is, it's not as though the criminals are static and we just have to catch them and then it'll be over. They are constantly moving, and part of the thing is the fraud. There's no one way they do online fraud. There's no one way or one target for extortion. They will have various means and methods. I mean, they figured out we could use teenagers as our patsies to actually be the foot soldiers and insulate us.
So yes, I understand people want to blame the police service. We are the frontliners. We take any blame on a regular basis when it comes to criminal activities. But are we accepting our responsibilities as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago as to what we can do? Now, simple. Let's at the level of the foundation, we keep speaking about how we interact in our homes, how we treat with our children, how we behave in society. You're driving on the road because you want to reach one particular way. It is okay for me to break the traffic light because I didn't cause anything. So it's okay. So you start to accept behaviors, and when you start to accept behaviors and saying these are small behaviors, these smaller are larger, and then we reach that stage now where a lot of things have been accepted.
And in that vein, there is some truth to the fact that some people will just accept the noise pollution. There has been some music going on by me. It sounds distant, but now I'm wondering if it's actually close by me because it's within a building that has some degree of soundproofing. But I do wonder, the people who are actually next to it, what the volume of it is like for them. But I can't figure out where this is coming from, who, why, and it seems as though there's like one music track that's been playing on loop. So it could just be that the occupants have left the building for a period of time, a long-term period of time, and this music was mistakenly left on to play, because I don't know how a group of people could literally hear the same techno beat for days.
Some people use that as a distraction from criminal elements because they want to make sure that people believe that I am home.
Right.
So there's a lot behind it in understanding what is happening in society. I
think so. Thanks to all the callers. Yes, I know. I appreciate the passion, caller. You were kind of taking up too much time. We weren't able. I'm sorry, Shagonas. I'm sorry, Trin City. Shagonas, I don't know what's up with the connection that caused that noise. We didn't have it for anyone else, so it could just be one of those quirks of our telecommunications in general. With that said, thanks to all the callers who called in, even those that weren't able to make it on air. We appreciate you. Thank you, ASP, for joining me once again. I'll just make one quick last observation. One of the things that we've done on this show is We've called out the opposition for not being able to hold the government to account. That's why the government could run away, kind of not be accountable. To some extent, it's similar for the ground level of policing. The people who are meant to enforce the rules and regulations for police, to some extent, they are not necessarily effective enough. Now, it's one thing to blame the commissioner and the executive, but there's also the PSB and the PCA. And I want to highlight the PCA especially. I don't doubt that Mr. West means well. I just don't know if it's because of the government or because of internal politics of the public service or the police union. I don't know what it is. The union, I don't know what it is. But the PCA seems to have no teeth. And at some point, if one of the main arms to enforce discipline and to hand out consequences seemingly is toothless or inept, I mean, at the end of the day, even a great commissioner cannot be sitting down next to each officer as they conduct their duties 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and so on and so on. Let's not forget that there are good officers in the service who are keeping the system up. It's one of the things, I think, with regards to either nurses or doctors, I can't remember what, where there are allegations where, look, the good ones, to some extent, are being held hostage because they have to carry the load. And it's more responsibilities put on them, whether actually formally or informally so. And at some point, we just have to hope that those ones that are actually doing the work don't burn out, especially as more and more responsibilities are added on. So I don't know what is needed to fix the PCA. I just don't necessarily see it as a body that is holding the excesses of the bad apples of the police to account. And at the end of the day, even within a group of reasonable people, if the discipline part of your organization is not functional, whatever that may look like, then you're eventually bound to get some issues. Because the police come from the population, whether we want to admit it or not, and will be a reflection of the population, at least to some degree, for good and bad. So as you pointed out, the SPLE, as the population also has its own issues with regards to morals, ethics, values, societal culture, etc. We can't expect the police service to just magically be in a vacuum. It's not like you all live in some other dimension sequestered from the rest of us.
So true. So it continues to be part of our agenda in trying to build trust and confidence, the public to build more trust and confidence in our police service and legitimacy in how we treat and the fairness in how we treat. It's sad that only negatives within the police service and interactions with the public is always being highlighted.
Well, I won't say that, but the positives don't get enough.
It does not get enough, and I'm saying
because I do try, especially when I see like a nice letter to the editor or what have you.
I'm not identifying on this, but on a general note, you don't really hear about it. Now, we don't want to get police officers want to get self-praise at the same time.
People won't buy it either. So
exactly,
yeah.
But I'm saying that there are a lot of things that the officers do on a regular basis. Look, for instance, over this weekend, there are a lot of events that was taking place in and around the Queen's Park Savannah where a lot of police officers gave up their time and effort to be there.
I wanted to highlight, but I didn't have time, but I think 2 weeks ago, the interception of a stolen truck pickup in Port of Spain.
Yes.
Which was done too sweet. It was stolen somewhere in the west.
So these are also things that you could identify when we deter crime and we arrest individuals for committing offenses. But what about the other aspects that we are involved in? And from a social perspective, from lending our support to a lot of different activities in and out.
I think at the end of the day, we need to admit ourselves that the problems have grown large, and at this point, the scope of the problems, the solution is not necessarily just blame the police, and the police need to do better, but there are some political dimensions to it that needs to really get the ball rolling to deal with a lot of these things. And it just so happens to be a general election coming up next year, which is why these things are important. So with that said, we went a little over time, but unfortunately we started late. That's for the morning viewers. Of course, you at night might not necessarily notice anything different. With that said, again, thanks to ASPLE, thanks to the callers. Make today a good day, as my colleague Mrs. Shah would always say. We can do it if we try. Remember your allegiance to each other and to this republic Stay safe out there. Be mindful of dengue. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sunnypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Mais c'est que le sport et l'activité physique sont devenus pour moi des outils d'autonomie indispensables et incontournables. Du jour au lendemain, tes bras deviennent tes jambes.
Donc je vais avoir de nombreuses greffes dans la foulée, dans les semaines qui suivent. Je vais avoir des greffes de nerfs, je vais avoir beaucoup d'opérations, mais ça ne va pas me permettre de rebouger complètement le bras.
Mon médecin généraliste m'a dit « Tout, tu ne pourras plus faire de sport ». Et pour moi, c'était insensé. Pourquoi? Parce que j'étais à la porte de l'équipe de France jeune et vous ne pourrez plus travailler debout. Alors que moi, je souhaitais être entraîneur de tennis de table. Heureusement, ce médecin, je ne l'ai pas écouté. Aujourd'hui, je joue toujours à l'âge de 55 ans et je suis aussi entraîneur breveté d'État.
Et puis un jour, le tennis. pourquoi je ne pourrais pas faire du tennis? Ah bah attends, tu sais qu'il y a un circuit de tennis en fauteuil au niveau national, mais au niveau international, il y a des Jeux paralympiques, le tennis en handisport, mais je fais c'est quoi tous ces mots-là? Je ne connais pas ce vocabulaire, ce lexique-là. Et j'ai découvert un sport dans lequel j'avais un bon niveau debout, où j'étais bon techniquement, mentalement. Et mon grand frère l'a très bien résumé quand je suis devenu champion de France. Le tennis en fauteuil, il m'a dit « Putain gros, ce sport était fait pour toi, t'as toujours eu un mental d'acier, technique de dingue, mais un jeu de jambes de merde. » Et il était assez visionnaire, c'est vrai que j'étais costaud du haut, un peu pâteau du bas. Et donc moi j'ai découvert un sport qui était particulièrement fait pour moi.
Je ne peux pas lever le bras, et donc je nage qu'avec un seul bras, et j'ai repris très vite la natation, dans un premier temps pour ma rééducation. Et j'ai vu la natation paralympique, et je me suis dit pourquoi je ne serais pas athlète paralympique. J'ai très vite accepté mon handicap grâce à ça. Aussi, ça a été, tu vois, une étape importante, parce que quand tu acceptes de devenir athlète paralympique, tu acceptes aussi de dire je suis en situation de handicap.
Mes débuts en handisport, ça a été vraiment difficile. Pourquoi? Parce que je n'ai jamais accepté mes soucis de santé. Et la première compète que je fais en Belgique fin 99, je suis rentrée dans cette salle avec environ 300 joueurs en situation de handicap. Et je pense que très sincèrement, la meilleure victoire que j'ai, c'est d'avoir vu ces gens et accepter mes soucis de santé. Et depuis, je le vis vraiment bien. Pourquoi accepter? Parce que moi, j'ai encore mes 4 membres. Et quand je vois ce monsieur en fauteuil qui n'a pas de bras, pas de jambes et qui joue avec la bouche, je me dis, je suis vraiment chanceuse par rapport à eux. Pour mes premiers jeux à Sydney, la finale incroyable. J'ai joué mon ping, j'ai joué tactiquement, la stratégie était bonne. Et puis quand tu gagnes, tu te dis t'as bien bossé. Tous ceux qui sont autour de moi ont vraiment bien bossé pour moi. Et c'est quelque part aussi un début d'une nouvelle carrière pour moi.
Je décide de dire adieu à mon psy au juillet 2004, avant de partir aux Jeux d'Athènes. J'ai ma sélection pour les Jeux d'Athènes, je suis comme un fou. Et là, je vais découvrir les vraies grosses émotions que le sport peut procurer. Quand je remporte contre l'Américain Steve Welsh, ma place pour la 3e place, pour le bronze. Et que là, il y a toute ma famille derrière moi. Ça fait 4 ans que j'ai mon accident. Notre vie a basculé à tous et à toutes. Après mes médailles d'Athènes, une fois que j'ai réatterri, là, l'objectif, c'est Pékin, mais c'est d'aller chercher la médaille d'or, en simple comme en double. J'arrive et je perds en quart de finale, comme Stéphane, qui lui aussi perd en quart de finale. Par contre, en double, on était, depuis 2-3 mois, les hommes à battre. On écrasait la concurrence. Et donc là, on arrive, on est en finale contre les Suédois. On gagne 6-1, 7-6 et on devient champion.